Welcome to episode 2 of FoundersGyan. Each week, we bring you an inspiring story of a startup and the founder behind it. And now please welcome your host, Ram.
What's up, everybody? In today's show, we talk to Alok Shankar, who's one of the co-founders of Nudgespot. That is www.nudgespot.com. Nudgespot aims to improve communication between businesses and customers and is certainly worth checking out as a tool. They also offer a basic and free tier for you to try out their software, which is a great boon to people just starting out. So go ahead and check them out, but after the show. Or maybe while listening to the show. How cool is that? A quick word of apology though. The show was recorded under less than ideal circumstances and you could continue to hear some noises in the background at some times. So please listen to the show for the content and I promise to keep improving the quality as time goes on. Okay, enough rambling. Let's get on with the show. Alok, welcome to the show. I've personally been so pumped ever since I got the opportunity to do this podcast with you. For those who don't know Alok, he's had a string of successes behind him, with his most recent being Zora, where he set up the entire offshore operation team in India and managed the team of almost 100. He's also the co-founder of Nudgespot.com, which recently got a round of funding from KAE Capital. Personally, it's a great honor to meet somebody like you, and thanks a lot for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge, wisdom, and time with our listeners. Thank you, Alok, for being on this show.
Sure, pleasure to be here.
Okay, Alok, let's first start with your journey before Nudgespot. So, can you tell us a bit more about your background and journey before you started Nudgespot?
Sure, I've been developing software for since the age of 14. Got a head start with some of the early on basic computers and had a lot of interest into developing some kind of like a basic games and stuff.
Okay.
But then a true like an employment based career I started close 16 years ago. Started working with some of the cool startups in the Bay Area, companies like Tavolo. They got acquired by Amazon. We worked with a company like Digital Insight. Eventually got acquired by Intuit. Then I joined a startup in Mountain View called Zora that was just starting up, and we were doing some kind of very cool high-tech stuff in terms of GPS and GIS mapping and trying to track the field workers, helping businesses solve those problems. So it was kind of very interesting, very early on of its time. And we did scale up the team quite well. We established business in India. I was pivoted to doing that. Worked for quite a few years with that company. Then I moved on to working with a company called People Fluent, where I kind of again started from scratch, build up their flagship product, build up their business in India, also managed part of their business in Europe. And then that was another company that I worked for almost 6 to 7 years. And finally, the bug bit me and decided to move on, right? So Raveen and I used to be kind of roommates back in California. And we also worked with the same company, so we started talking, and I think we all had some great ideas. We've seen some of the customer communication problems in the past. So we decided that let's just try and solve one problem, and here we are.
That's great. So you just mentioned that Raveen and you were roommates. So were you studying together? Were you roommates when you were working? How did you end up in California in the first place?
Well, so yeah, I mean that was my first job really. I actually got a job with working for one of the U.S. Embassy project, and that made me travel to Bay Area. And I met Raveen the first time when I think it was like we were just all partying around with the friends. And we all were like, we just knew common friends, and then we started to, so Raveen and his friend used to come to me and my friends' house more often, like having some beer around. So, and then one day we decided, hey, let's just, we move into one big house. We took a big house, 5 of us, shared the place. And Raveen had just joined this startup, so he convinced me that that's the best place to go. So there's a gentleman named Ganesh, Panchanathan Ganesh. He was the CTO. So we spoke, and it was very early on. So we all decided to just join and work at the same company. So It's been an awesome ride since then.
Okay, cool. So can you tell us exactly what is Nudgespot and how did you guys come up with this idea?
Okay, Nudgespot is primarily a customer intelligence and communication platform. Basically in the modern world of consumerization, where a consumer is kind of very impatient into knowing anything, and basically, so when you walk into a restaurant, for example,
Right.
you already know the menu, you already know everything that they have, the kind of best rated food and stuff like that.
Right.
So you expect the businesses to know how they should interface with you, right?
Okay.
And consumers already know about the business, and businesses don't know anything about them, and it actually creates a communication gap. So in today's world, it's basically extremely critical. If you want your consumers to come back to you over and over again, the only reason they will do that is how you basically interact with them. And in order to enable that interaction, we bring that to online businesses. Online businesses are kind of getting more and more impersonal. They kind of have, it's more about like sending these promotions, sending these offers,
Right.
just blinding sending it off, right? What we are trying to do is, hey, control that communication, make it more contextual, make it
Okay.
more sensitive to what state the person is in, so that you can provide them a better experience.
Okay.
So Nudgespot as a platform allows you to connect with your customers in a contextual manner, and also be very responsive when a customer reaches out to you.
Okay.
So that's what we enable.
Okay. So maybe as an example, just today I got a message from Ola is one of your customers, right?
Yes.
Okay, just today I got a message from Ola that we missed you. You have not used our services for a long time, and here's a coupon code for some 100 rupees off or something. So is that an example of using your software, or that's
Yes,
not
yes.
what we're talking
No,
about?
that is true. Ola in fact uses us for all of their engagement efforts, and this is one of the very basic example, right? So if you want to have a proactive communication, the right time to reach you. So let's say Ola's example, if you have not used their services, if you have been a regular user of their service and suddenly you drop off.
Right.
Now by the time the 7 days elapses, I think you're pretty much at the edge, right?
Right.
Now Ola has spent probably a lot of money overall to acquire you.
Right.
They shouldn't want to let you go away so quickly. So they reach out to you subtly at the right point in time to say, hey, you're perhaps, is there something that we can do? Did you know that there is another service that's coming up
Right.
in your particular area that could interest you? Let's say you have not responded to that message. I'm not going to keep on spamming you.
Right.
I'm going to reach out to you at a most appropriate time, maybe 7 days later,
Okay.
and then start to give you some kind of incentive for you to come back to us.
Okay.
And that's what they do.
That's great. So how did you guys come up with this idea in the first place?
Right. So, in fact, we look at it, the businesses, right? And we have been in this field of developing product for businesses and consumers. Raveen comes from a background where he has dealt with a lot of consumer-facing companies like Myntra, Upos, and he has seen that part of the world where how critical and how important it is to continue to communicate with the customers, and how
Right.
easily it can completely get out of hand. You have no idea what your one hand is doing the other hand.
Right.
Same I bring in from the business background, where I've had a lot of my customers have been kind of business customers. Although I have worked with some of the consumer startups in the Bay Area, I've seen this problem consistently across every business. The way you end up communicating with your customers or consumers
Right.
is the only reason that eventually they come back to you, because sometimes the wrong communication can put them completely off.
True.
Right. So instead of, it's sometimes better to not to send the communication than to send the communication.
Yeah,
We help
yeah.
you decide when to not to send the communication as
Okay,
well.
okay.
So that's where, and I think collectively we saw this as a problem, and we started with the Indian market, and we are expanding to the US and European.
Okay.
But in India, I see that because of the vast flourishing consumer kind of internet companies that are coming up today, the amount of communication has been overwhelming.
Right.
And it's kind of problem that I think it's right time to start solving.
Okay, that's brilliant. So for our budding founder listeners out there, can you tell us, maybe not exactly from Nudgespot's perspective, but since you guys have been with a lot of startups and have been also to a lot of different startup events and stuff like that, how exactly do you come up with a winning idea?
There is nothing called a winning idea, honestly speaking. The ideas are plenty, and you wouldn't believe it. I've been almost thinking about starting up for more than 10 years. And here I am, right, and start up at a stage where you kindly, pretty much ripe yourself up. There are plenty of ideas. They will sound very interesting, but you very soon realize that you're the only person probably finding.
Okay.
So the winning idea is basically, it all lies in the initial execution, right? I mean, the most winning idea is the simplest problem. Take one small little problem and solve it extremely well.
Okay.
And that'll definitely stand out.
Okay. So that's kind of the Paul Graham Y Combinator school of thought, right?
Absolutely. It's, and it holds good.
Okay. So that nicely brings me up to my next question, which is, okay, I now have an idea, or maybe one of the listeners out there has a nice idea, and they have validated it, they've talked to friends, and they're able to see that there's some value in it. Now, what do they do in order to make the idea into a reality? How do they execute it?
Right. I mean, execution is everything. One of the thing is basically, obviously, getting your friends to vouch for it is great, but not sufficient. You obviously need to have to figure out whether somebody is willing to pay for it.
Right.
And although we do have like a free tier kind of plan, we're always against this whole concept of somebody is not willing to pay. It's probably still not yet validated. But in terms of the starter execution, I would say, focus on the core of the problem. Try to release something very simple, very minimalistic, and test out with your audience, right? Even with our subscription kind of service product, we look at it, we have done a lot of legwork. I mean, I must have talked to close to 1,000 people over the last 1 year, met with them in personally, trying to understand their business problem, trying to adopt the product and see whether it really works for them. So it's kind of very gradual process, very laborious, but you can get a lot of mileage right from the beginning when your offering is extremely simple. So you get a very concrete yes and no kind of directional move and adopting in the next, or finding out your next step. But if you build a lot in the beginning, it's going to be very hard for you to find what's the next thing that you should do.
Right. Okay, so yeah, this kind of reminds me of an interview that I listened with somebody called Ramit Sethi. I'm not sure if you have ever heard from him. No, there's somebody from the US. So what he says is that once you have a product, if you are able to find 5 people who say, yes, I will pay for it, and it should be a solid yes. It's not, maybe I'll pay for it, or let the product come, I will likely pay for it. No, this is a product, would you pay for it? And if you get yes from 5 different people, that means that you have a product.
Right.
And like you say, I think coming up with the basic product, the basic form of the product, I think is a good tip, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we did the same thing. I mean, when we launched it, we actually had 3 guys ready to pay for it and waiting for it to be ready.
Okay.
So, and that's what actually encouraged us to say, okay, this sounds like a good idea. Let's just go ahead and start to build that. And these are the guys you typically call angels, right? I mean, angel adopters. They were very patient. We had a lot of hiccups in the beginning, as usual. And we continue to kind of, we appreciate the kind of, they have kept up with us. They're still our customers. We continue to extend the discounted pricing to them. So some of these things that comes as a reward for their initial coping up with us.
Right.
But it's important to find these kind of people, right? And and you can only do that if you talk to people.
Right.
So.
Okay, so just want to touch a little bit more on releasing the minimum viable product. I think that's the term that's used. A lot of people, I think, are so keen and so interested on making their product the best that they are almost afraid that, okay, if I release a product and it's shitty, for want of a better word, even if it's a paying customer, they are scared that, okay, it might fail. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, there's nothing personal about, right? If somebody thinks something is a different problem, I really don't care about what an individual thinks, right? The core is whether you're solving that problem for them or not, right? And believe me or not, even if your product doesn't have a good user interface, people will continue to use, in your word, shitty product, right? They will continue to use a shitty product if it solves a problem for them. And that's the key, right? If you just have like a basic, HTML table design and have some data push in and it solves a problem, you don't need those high, this sleek looking transient. I mean, you don't want to invest into those things unless it's proven. I would say people like to see their problem being solved. And sometimes you get carried away and say, hey, this is a high profile guy. He should see that something more meaty exists in my product. Now, sometimes the form of creating that meat, you create a fat. And that's actually the problem.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, okay, that's brilliant. I love it. Just let's move on a little bit on to a personal question. So we all hear about founders sacrificing, family time in order to succeed in business. And you have a 4-year-old son and a 8-month-old daughter. So how do you manage family and business? Also considering the fact that your wife would have been pregnant with your daughter during the formation of Nudgespot, if I'm getting my timelines right.
No, you're right. In fact, I have a 4-year-old daughter and another 8-month-old daughter.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I think I got it as 4-year-old son. Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. They're pretty. I try and find time to be with them. In fact, I happen to just sometime get my work home. I've got like a one-room reserved for myself, and they sometimes come walking in when I'm on the calls and stuff like that. So it's challenging. It is kind of tricky. When we start, you have to be prepared to like miss out all the parties, miss out some of the time with the family. Your customers are going to be your next best friends, believe it or not, right?
Okay.
End up spending so much time with them. So it's better to learn to adapt with them, right?
Right.
My wife's been great. She's a wonderful lady. She's managed through a lot. She supports me a lot too, and I it's like, yes, you will miss the family, but I think it's for the best. So yeah, I try and find as much time as possible. Maybe at least take a couple of days off in a month and try and spend some time. But it is hard. It's hard.
So there's no getting around it, because I had another interview with somebody and he was saying the same thing. I mean, there's no getting over the fact that it's tough.
Yeah, it's actually tough from that point of view. I somehow feel like, hey, I could have just started 10 years ago, right? It would be a lot more easier.
Yeah.
When you have family, it becomes you have that guilt. You get in a guilt trip, right?
Right.
You say you're probably not doing something right. When you're taking time away from family, what the time that they deserve from you. But hoping that things starts to become better.
So a little aside on that is, now there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are just out of college and they don't have wife, kid, no EMIs to pay, no house EMIs, car EMIs, and they boldly go into this, starting their own ventures. But people like me and you, maybe we are a little bit late into the game. So what kind of advice would you give for such people?
Yeah, and I think it all depends on like individuals, right? I mean, I don't think age is really concern. It's the timing, right? Timing when you think it's right, when you're ready to really go roll with it. Mm-hmm. My only advice is, if you think that you're ready, you should not delay. Just get on with it and try it out. And if you like something, by all means, why not, right? You're just out of college and there's something bugging you, let's just get over with it, and at least you will learn a lot. I think experience is the best teacher, right? I mean, there is nothing else that will teach you better.
Right.
If you're thinking like I remember everybody like pushing, hey, why don't you do an MBA, why don't you do PhD, and I straight away jumped to a job, and that taught me a lot. And in fact, over the last couple of years, I always realized that, hey, so much I was missing, right? Even though I had been in the working for almost 16 years, you always have something to learn every day. And so it's all about a learning experience. If you're a curious kind, if you are more entrepreneurial, I would say just jump right in.
Yeah. So your advice would be, don't delay if you think. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Nudgespot was started with 3 other people apart from you, right? So tell me a bit more about your co-founders and how's the chemistry between you guys?
It's wonderful. They're great guys. Ravi, well, we go a long way back, so I think that's it's kind of much to say there. We've kind of been on for a really long time. Been very close. Even families are very close. Anubhav, I met through Raveen. Anubhav and Raveen used to work at Hupos together. So I know Anubhav, and now I know that I know Anubhav, so I'm glad that I know Anubhav. So he's an amazing guy, a great tech, takes care of technology in our company, and very easy to get along. Suresh is another wonderful guy. Again, Suresh used to work at ThoughtWorks. We have some common connections with some of the friends that we've worked with in the past. Very, very sharp guy. In fact, Nudgespot, the earlier avatar of Nudgespot was started by Suresh, and we basically kind of killed the older product. We started afresh. We started this company. So this is like a new company that we incorporated, but we kept the same name. And Suresh has a lot of experience into, he's been into the startups mode for quite long time. He's been sort of like mentoring me as well in the beginning to how to think about, from the Indian context, startup, mindset, and he's a great guy. I think and I personally respect all of these guys very much, and they're great. Yeah.
Okay. So time for a difficult question. So can you tell us a story about an extreme disagreement between you guys on the Nudgespot product, of course, and how did you manage to solve the problem? Surely there must have been some disagreements.
Of course, there is nothing like disagreements. I think we have had a lot of disagreements in the beginning, and that's part of the process. I think, when a lot of these guys come from great experience with them, there's obviously going to be a very refined point of view on how we want to move things forward. There are quite a few things that we agree on. In the beginning, we had some disagreement in terms of how we want to go out from MVP and get into one direction.
Right.
How do we position the product, right? So we started with the first. In fact, the first version of the product that we started with was, it comprised of certain features which were more about providing context, providing, the communication line between the business and the app. And we built that product, we built that feature, we actually retired that feature, and today the need of the hour is we actually bringing it back aggressively. And today we sit together, hey dude, we should have done that, and we would have carried on with that particular. So we pivoted product depending on how we saw the market, how we heard from the customer. As we got more customer, we started to realize more things. So there were state where we were kind of speculating, where there was state that we were trying to be very kind of cautious around what the next step to take, which ones make more sense, which one is best, use of our time and the use of time for our employees. So we've had some kind of disagreements there where we all kind of have very positive kind of conflict, so to speak, right? We get into a coffee shop, we'll probably spend like hours together and trying to come to the same page, and eventually we do. I mean, that's a beautiful part of it. So I think it's all the effort worth it. So those were initial stages where we had quite a few of those disagreements.
Okay.
But nowadays I think we're pretty much, everybody's in sync. Everybody knows the way the other person thinks about it, and this is the right state to be in.
That's great. So just quickly, I wanted to just check on the name Nudgespot. So what does it signify?
Yeah, Nudgespot it's a lot to do with having your customers take the next right steps.
Right.
And we call them just nudge, and the nudge word came in basically to the kind of behavior tracking that we do. Basically we build the customer intelligence, and then we enable businesses to actually nudge their customers to take the next right step. So if you're like an online company which is delivering your product or services online, you would want your customers to keep moving into the right direction, into using your product more, and knowing more about your product, using them more, and eventually becoming a champ of the product. So then they start to get more and more people, and you have an organic growth. So for ourselves, like if you take an example, we want people who are signing up. It's a self-service product. We want people who are signing up to be able to publish their first message within 7 days. Now, if they don't do that, it's basically, there are a few reasons for it that they couldn't do that. Maybe they just didn't get it, how to do that. Maybe they need some more help. So we execute a communication strategy that nudges them to do that. Maybe we'll just ask them a question, hey, did you know that you could do something like that? Does it help you? And if it doesn't respond, then we can say, okay, you know what? Here are the 3 tips to engage better with your customers, and these are some of the sample templates that you could use. So we're trying to be more contextual at that point in time. And once they have published their first message, my intent now, from my business point of view, is to move them to the next direction, which is continuously use it repeatedly over and over again, Define your first behavior. Maybe that's your next step, Then now you're gradually becoming an advanced. You're nudging towards becoming more advanced user of the product, consumer of my services and stuff like that.
Okay, brilliant. So what's the minimum number of customers that a business needs to have in order to use your product?
We have designed our product to be more like a startup friendly. So we have small and medium sized businesses who can come in and use our product. We have a free tier which is intended to be like just for startups who are just getting started. You may have there's no minimum limit to it. But the moment you reach 200 plus, you pretty much come out of the free tier. 200 customers is kind of very low number, and we know quite a few companies will just offer 100,000 minimum and stuff. They're more designed for email marketing and those kind of campaigns. Ours is more like a contextual, triggered messages and continuous engagement kind of solution. So we want customers to become a lot more serious the moment you become more 200 more. So we have like startup plans, the entry points, which gives you like a sort of a $39 plan that gives you up to 5,000, and then we have like a tiered based pricing approach.
Okay, this is great. Is there a morning ritual that you follow, and if yes, can you share that with our listeners?
Well, the morning walk is one thing that we do regularly. That's especially the time that I get some time to spend with my kids, and obviously then that ends up being like them getting ready, rushing through. My wife is rushing through, trying to get them ready for their school, and I make sure that I walk them to the school bus. So that's one kind of ritual that I follow. Other than that, it's kind of it's kind of pretty. The day changes every day pretty much, right? I mean, now we've started getting customers from all over the world, so sometimes people don't even see the time at what time they're calling you, and they reach out for some of the help and stuff, and we're not really like, we're a product company, so right now we are like 10 people, and so we, it's kind of, sometimes you do get disturbed, right? It totally changes the routine, and even the weekend is kind of not free. So
I love the fact that you're using getting your kid to the bus as a ritual. I mean, it probably helps you relax, and the days you do that, I'm sure you're very productive.
Yeah, and the terrible part is that by the time I come back from office and get to home, they're pretty much asleep. So that's the only time that I get, and it fills in a lot of energy, a lot of joy, right, to start your day with.
Okay, brilliant. Can you tell us something about yourself that is not commonly known? Could be business-wise, could be personal-wise.
There is nothing very special about me, honestly speaking. I am just one of the regular guys. Usual kind of likings. I like to travel a lot. I've pretty much traveled, half of the world.
Wow.
I've done that a lot. Even with my wife, I've done a lot of travel. Like, I'm a foodie, and there's nothing so different about it. But I pretty much tried all the cuisines that I love, and
that's great. Yeah, I'm sure people don't know that about you unless they are your close friends. Just want to touch a little bit on inspiring listeners. We all know that startups are not a walk in the park, and there's a lot of negative message also in the media about startups and the founders. Going through a lot of stress, quitting, stopping the startups, and going back to regular jobs and stuff like that. So, where do you personally get your inspiration from, and what would you advise our listeners to do in order to get inspiration?
Sure. I think, it's not really a marathon, right? I mean, it's just like, I know you hear a lot of success stories, you hear a lot of sudden funding and like big. See, startup is more about, it's an art and a science both, right? You got to take, you got to execute, you got to take calculated steps and go slow, right? Go really slow, and don't depend too much on luck, right? I know that sometimes your things may just fly well because of the timings. Maybe your lucks, you were in the right place in the right time, but just try to maximize your chances, by just being as many places as possible, in terms of what your business demands. But if you just run too fast in the beginning, you might just get tired, and that's when I've heard the stories too. When people generally 98% of them basically just shut down every year. So that's a very discouraging number. But if you really execute it well, keep the momentum very rhythmic, and kind of don't burn yourself out, I think you're going to do well.
Okay. So maybe one of the tricks could be celebrate every little success also, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You do that. In fact, every time somebody sign up, or every time something that goes right, you should celebrate that, and those are the things that will help you, right?
Brilliant. Can you tell us about an extreme low point in your business and how you managed to overcome it, and the lessons you learned from that experience?
Well, we have been quite young. We haven't had any extreme low point in the business. In fact, our revenue's just been going at a steady pace. So we launched in November last year. We already do close to $250,000, and it's been on a rising curve. So we are yet to see the low point, and while I'm very optimistic, I know every business sees that, but so far, I think we have been seeing a good growth, good traction. Close to 160 businesses, less than a year using our product is kind of good. Obviously, we could have done better, but as of now, no. But I think it's been And like I said, I mean, we could have done better, and that statement itself shows that I could have run faster, and then I could have had a low point.
Okay. So maybe is there something else in your career like to share?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I haven't had that kind of stories. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's not like I don't have that kind of story. I mean, we had a up and low points, but it's not been like a really low point as such. Even my career has been like, if you look at my LinkedIn profile and stuff, look at it. I started as a programmer. I continued to work upwards. The usual path that you travel, like being a senior software engineer, being a project lead, then being to a development manager, then senior manager, director of engineering, director of India operations, director of European operations. So pretty much been through this entire gamut of career, and that's where I was like, okay, if I just stick a little bit longer, it's just going to be what SVP of something, but it's just and then you start getting your gray hairs, right?
Right.
And I've been working continuously. I have not I started my career, continued to work, and never took a break.
Okay.
And maybe that's the low point. Maybe that's the low point you're looking for.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But I'm happy that you haven't really had any major low points, because it might be good to hear those stories, but the person had to go through a lot of trouble, to turn defeat into victory. So, touching back a little bit more on Nudgespot, can you talk a bit more about the business model? You already obviously talked about the tiered model. So is there anything more that you'd like to add onto that? And also, what is the future that you envision for Nudgespot?
Sure. So we target businesses, and we charge based on active subscribers that the businesses end up engaging in a given month. Our model is pretty straightforward. It's a no contract, if you like your product, as long as you like, use the product. If you derive value, use the product. Stop using, don't pay us. As simple as that. Because we are very confident that once you start using the product, you will find value and you will start expanding into your use. So that's the model that we follow, and it's kind of come online, self-service, sign up, and start using. And we continue to experiment with pricing too, right? I mean, till last year when we launched, we had like a different kind of pricing. But now I think we started to offer sort of like a free tier, where we wanted to get, at least to help out the startups community, and to have them start using the product, and as they grow, and they come into the pricing tier, we sometimes even waive it off for them, for people who come back and say, hey, you know what, $39 is too expensive. I said, don't worry about it. If you can, and we even reach out to them, help them out, do some integrations and stuff like that. On a bigger, broader vision of where we are today and where we want to be, we want to basically transform completely the way businesses communicate with their customers. Mm-hmm. And we want to be sort of a direct line between business and customer. So today, if you start, we are actually going to be introducing two-way conversation very soon. So you can virtually start to help out your customer no matter where they are. So let's say they start to reach out, they come into your product, they sign up, and then they run into some difficulty into onboarding, right? Maybe using your first feature.
Right.
And they reach out to you. You should be able to respond and then continue on that conversation no matter where they are. So they continue to be on their mobile device, your conversation continues, right?
Right.
And not only that, as a business, anybody in your team will continue to pick it up from where you left off.
Right.
So this gives like an end customer experience. Is a direct connect with the customer, right? The way your business ends up communicating with your customer is the single most reason that they will come back to you.
Right.
Again. And today's businesses are challenged with actually making that possible, simply because the channels are many, customers are just everywhere now, right? It's kind of ubiquitous, right? There are so many platforms, there are so many devices,
right.
There are so many apps that you can communicate within.
Right.
So it's very hard to really keep track of where the customer is and how can I keep my communication channel open with him. So yeah, in a nutshell, this is where we want to be. And
okay, that's great. Any books or resources for our budding entrepreneurs?
Well, I used to be a very avid book reader when I was young. I used to read a lot, mostly like fiction, novel and stuff like that.
Okay.
But more recently, honestly speaking, I haven't really got a chance to really catch up on my books.
Okay.
I know there are some of the books in the initial part of my career, right? Demonstrate to Win and some of those kind of books that you start to read. And very soon I realized that I think I'm better off to just switching on to the TED Talk.
Okay.
I love those. Like some of those talks are like amazing. And especially there is so much of content on the internet that you end up getting inspired from.
Right.
So I keep hunting for those now. I mean,
Right.
I'm basically, hard to say, but I'm almost moving away from books.
Right.
I think it's simply because I've not been getting a lot of vacation. You get into a vacation, you just carry a book all the time.
Right.
But mostly, whatever time that you can squeeze out from work, like, sometimes 15, 20 minutes, you just turn on a TED Talk channel and then you're on. And I like to read Wikipedia, any topic that just bothers me at any point in time.
Right.
I just like to read about it. And
Okay.
so it's kind of very sporadic.
Okay, so you kind of recommend TED Talk?
TED Talk, yes, absolutely. They're amazing.
Okay, brilliant. Any other interests that you actively pursue when you have some spare time? If you have some spare time?
I like to play some of the racket balls. I play table tennis with my friends when I find some time. I play pool, billiards. Sometimes just simply play frisbees with my daughters.
Okay.
But that's pretty much about it. Not much into this whole cricket and things like that.
Okay. So with the experience of Nudgespot behind you, and I think it's about a year now.
Yes, a little more than a year that we started. For the first launch of the product is in the market for a little less than a year.
Okay, let's consider that it's 1 year. And with this experience behind you, what would you do different? Let's say if you had to start the same Nudgespot today.
That's an interesting question, because you could always improvise, look back and say, hey, I could have done this differently. In fact, the two-way conversation that I was talking about, if I were to redo that, I would go back in time and actually do that first.
Okay.
Because if I look at it, in today's businesses have more of a need to communicate in that manner. We started strengthening a lot on our one-way communication. We in fact scaled it up, that we do like auto server scaling that crunches real-time data. Today we do like 250 million activities crunching on a monthly basis, just to scale the one-way conversation. Mm-hmm. But the effective value that a business derives is kind of half.
Right.
And if I were to really go back and do that, I would have built the two-way as an MVP and start to explore more in the market.
Okay. That's very interesting, right? Because it was taken out of the product, like you mentioned.
Yeah. We actually just stopped at one point and we said, okay, you know what? Let's just because part of the reason is that you start to get some of the customers who end up finding a lot more value into what they're doing, and initially you have to do a lot of listening with the customer, right? And then we started to solidify that, and that worked to our advantage, and that gave us pretty good revenue to start with. But then we look at now bigger masses, the bigger play that we are missing, right? And when some of the customers started coming back to say, hey, do you have this? Do you have this now started using it. So more or so, I think it's naturally evolving in a cycle. But obviously, you want to win the game. You will say, okay, let me just go back in time and do that right to the beginning. Right. So you always will look at that. But I think we have come in a more organic way, and I like the way we are today.
Okay, brilliant. So I just have one final question. But before we go on to that question, how can our listeners get in touch with you apart from your official email? Do you have a blog? You have a LinkedIn handle, Twitter handle?
Yes, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm there. You can also tweet me at Alok_Shankar. I'm on Facebook. I'm sure you'll find me.
Okay.
Just say Alok Shankar Nudgespot. I'm sure you'll be able to find me there.
Okay, brilliant. So before we go on to the final question, I just want to take the time and acknowledge you and thank you for sharing your knowledge to myself and our listeners. I'm also very grateful for the value that you're adding into this world and into the e-commerce system by means of your company. So thanks a lot for that. And with that, we'll move on to the final question. So if there is one gyan that you could give our would-be founders, what would that be?
Well, there are plenty that you would hear about, but I would say being someone a company which is transforming the way businesses communicate, I would say the way your business ends up communicating with your customer is probably the single most reason that they will come back to you. Mm-hmm. And I think it holds true pretty much whether you do it through the software or you do it in person. Mm-hmm. So have that communication channel on with your customers, and please communicate more contextually and and I'm sure they'll keep coming back to you.
Brilliant. So more to do with communication and a bit of support also. Maybe a good support system in place.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's one thing that we are pretty much known for. I think we just walk pretty much our customers by hands and take up the call any time of the day. I mean, you really have no control of your day when you're in this. So,
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alok, for your time. It was a real pleasure chatting with you, and wish you continued success in your business.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
That's it, folks, for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it inspiring and useful. So please go ahead and share it with your friends, your colleagues, people whom you think would find this show useful using one of the nifty icons below. If you would prefer to email, the link is foundersgyan.com/ep02. I'll be back next week with yet another great entrepreneur, yet another great startup, yet another great story. Till then, you know what the show is all about. It's about getting inspired, taking the first step. Please go ahead and do that today. Thank you.